Welcome to Volume 3 of our 4-part gambling protection video series. Volume 3 completes the card section by revealing a wide variety of cheaters' techniques. First, we'll take a look at some methods used to hold out and muck cards. These are the gamblers' terms that describe the art of palming or hiding cards undetectably in the hand. Next, we'll cover the most blatant, most dangerous form of cheating, the cold deck. You'll see how an entire deck of cards can be switched into play. We'll then examine some specialized moves for the 4 most popular card games being played in the country today. For the game of poker, you'll see how 2 players teaming up can switch cards from one hand to another, as well as the cheater's code, check copying, and a technique for dealing known hole cards. We'll take a look at the game of blackjack as it's played privately. We'll expose hole card switches, the turnover, and the high-low shuffle. We'll take apart some crooked dealing shoes and examine a little-known move called the blackjack bottom. Gin is the country's #1 most popular head-to-head game. Our exposés will show how an amateur cheater might attempt the counterfeit meld. We'll also examine techniques used by the professional cheater, such as location or playing with extra cards. Finally, we'll examine the sophisticated game of bridge. As always, you'll see a number of protection tips and procedures to help you prevent some of these techniques. Let's begin by observing some of the techniques used to hold out cards. In our first scenario, a technique called the gambler's palm is used to help nullify the cut. Notice that the deck is legitimately cut and carried, yet the aces are still under control. The aces were being held out and concealed in the left hand during the cutting action. Where a shift or hop maintains the entire deck's order, the gambler's palm controls a few cards and is frequently used just before the bottom deal. Let's expose the gambler's palm. For the demonstration, the aces start on top and are individually shuffled to the bottom where a break is held. A small squaring action positions the cards just far enough back in the hand to stay hidden from all players. The cut is carried and the deck placed back on top of the aces to complete the move. Here's another palming technique that's used to control only one card. Watch the joker, or bug as it's frequently called. After the shuffles, the cards are legitimately cut and carried, yet the joker stays on top. Never underestimate how strong the complete control of one card is. There are many head-to-head games where the dealer will hold out one bad card with this technique and then deal it to his opponent to begin the hand. Here's the exposé. After a couple of false shuffles, we'll move to slow motion to expose the palming action. The hands come to a resting position with the joker safely concealed. The joker is simply added to the new top half of the deck as the cut is completed. Here's another application of the top palm. The game is clob or clubby-ash, a rummy-type game played with 32 cards. Each player starts off with 6 cards dealt in groups of 3. Here, the palming technique has enabled the dealer to steal 1 extra card. The game is unique because after some bidding, each player receives an additional 3 cards before the hand actually begins. This provides the opportunity to make an easy cleanup, as the dealer deals only 2 instead of the required 3. Let's watch the palming action, which immediately follows the first part of the deal. Notice that even though the extra card is held out in the right hand, the same hand is used to turn over the top card and table the deck. The card is added to the dealer's hand to start him out with 1 extra card. At this point, a subtle false dealing action cleans up the move and gets everything back to normal. The dealer simply takes 2 cards instead of 3. Here's a series of holdout moves that are called cops. This move takes just a second and is executed during the cutting action. This is a good example of how a player can steal and hold out a card even though he's not dealing. In slow motion, you'll see the technique exposed. The player cops a card in the same time it takes to simply cut the deck. Here's another cop along the same lines. You presented the deck to an opponent to cut. He gives the cards a quick shuffle and then cuts. It's during the shuffling action that he steals a card. In games played for any significant amounts of money, it's common to see the player shuffle after the dealer. This move blends right in. Our expose clearly exposes the technique. Cards are brought off the table for an in-the-hands riffle shuffle. The cop takes place during the shuffle and squaring action. This time, watch the ace of clubs. This player is about to throw his hand away. As you can see, the ace was copped from play. This move is extremely easy and can be applied to many card games. Anytime a card is copped and held out from play, the intention is to switch it back in at the most profitable time, when the cheater needs that extra edge to ensure a win. The expose clearly shows how the left thumb does all the dirty work at the exact moment the hand is tossed away. Here's the same situation, different cop. If you've gambled for any length of time, then you've probably run into a player shuffling the cards in this fashion. These actions provide the cover for a very deceptive steal. Always remember, as you view these moves, you're only watching a close-up of the hands and cards, and not the many distractions that take place during the typical card game. The desired card, the ace of clubs, is immediately shuffled into the palm position. A few more shuffles, one last peek at the hand, and the cop is completed. The mechanical holdouts are one answer to the question, what does a cheater do with a card or cards once they're stolen from play? This small clip-type piece of metal is called a bug and can be instantly stuck to the bottom side of any table to hold out cards. The bug will enable cheaters to hold out cards, switch them in and out of play, and never have their hands leave the tabletop. A more common hideout is directly under the knee. If another player gets suspicious and decides to count the cards, cheater would straighten out his leg, let the card fall to the floor, and hopefully give the impression that the missing card was accidental. Of course, the card could remain concealed in the palm if the cheater had intentions of using it immediately. Finally, the possibility remotely exists that you may run into a player using a very old but sophisticated holdout machine. These machines will keep cards hidden in the sleeve until needed. They can be automatically switched in and out of the game with no obvious movement of the hands. This holdout machine is called a Keplinger or knee spread. All straps are obviously worn underneath the clothing. This small hook would be painted a flat black to match a dark-colored pants. On the other leg is the connection. This small loop is placed onto the hook during play. In this position, if the legs are spread, the machine is activated, and a pulley-type system sends the held-out card into the hand. When the legs are closed, the arm mechanism moves back into the sleeve hidden from view. The Keplinger is capable of producing some pretty incredible switches, but fortunately, due to the difficulty in perfecting this machine, the chances of running into one are rare. Mucks are the gambler's nickname for the actual switches of the held-out cards. The first technique is a blackjack muck. The ace is switched in for the 6, giving the player winning blackjack. Notice the resting position of the hands after the muck is completed. The expose begins with the held-out ace in the right hand. You will see how the left hand moves the 6 back into the palm. The ace is mucked in, the queen displayed, and the 6 copped back out of play. In this next blackjack muck, both cards will be switched for a winning blackjack. The cheater may have held out the ace and jack from a previous deal. The money in the left hand is sometimes used to help conceal cards for these types of moves. The expose will reveal a blatant switch. Here, timing is more important than the actual technique. After all, it's tough to detect even the most obvious move when you're simply not watching. The game is draw poker. Player has missed his flush and ended up with 4 spades and the 9 of hearts. The muck will steal the 9 from play and produce a flush in spades. What we're trying to show here is that some mucking techniques are possible even though the fingers of both hands remain open. The cheater is trying to show without saying that it's impossible to have any other cards concealed. This is the type of muck you're likely to run into against a professional. The expose reveals a unique palming position called a clip. This position enables the card to be concealed while the fingers remain open, as you'll see in the final display. Here's one final muck from the game of 7-card stud. In this game, each player ends up with 3 face-down cards, 2 hole cards in a river or 7th Street card. This player has held out 3 aces, and the muck is a 3-for-3 exchange. The aces can be copped one at a time during previous hands and held out until the cheater makes an open pair. The muck then gives the player a powerful and virtual lock hand of 3 aces full. The expose clearly shows all actions. How many cards are held out and switched in and out of play depends on 2 things. Number 1, the skill and courage of the cheater, and number 2, how weak and observant the opponents are. Let's look at our first set of protection tips. You've viewed how the gambler's palm and top palm can be used to help nullify the cut. You've seen a number of quick copping techniques showing you some of the possibilities for stealing cards from play. Both the bug and holdout machine can assist a cheater mechanically. Beware of any player who continually brings his hands below the table level. You've seen a number of card mucks keying in on the games of blackjack and poker. Here's a look at the more common palming positions, starting with the standard or flat palm. The hands can rest in the fist position if the card is held out deeper in the hand. And finally, it's quite possible to conceal a card in the hand with the fingers spread wide open. Switching a pre-stacked deck into play is probably the most dangerous cheating technique you'll ever run into. This first switch takes place as the player apparently cuts the cards. The entire exchange takes only a second. Gamblers call this scam the cold deck or cooler. The reason being that a deck that's been in play a while becomes warm due to player handling. The new deck or cooler is actually a bit colder. One entire deck is held out in the left hand, and during a cutting action the switch is made. Here's a deck switch where the dealer does the work. Cards can be legitimately shuffled and cut. It's important to remember that these moves are rarely attempted by one cheater working alone. There's almost always a team involved called a mob. As a matter of fact, it's not uncommon to have 1 or 2 victims in an entire 6- or 7-handed game. From this view, we see the cooler positioned in the dealer's lap. We see a legitimate shuffle, and as the deck is passed for the cut, the cooler is picked up. The legitimate deck is momentarily placed on top of the cooler. A tapping action covers the switch as the original deck is tossed into the dealer's lap. Even though the move is fast and deceptive, A team of cheaters will ensure the scam's success by distracting and turning all players away from the move. Here's one final deck switch. You shuffle and present the deck to a player to cut. He in turn passes the cards to another player. This is a pre-rehearsed act that provides the necessary cover for this deck switch. This is the type of technique you're likely to run into in a banking card game like blackjack. In these games, it's not uncommon for different players to cut out of turn or to have the same lucky player cut repeatedly. Now from a top view, you'll see the starting position of the cooler, the passing action, and the actual switch. Let's take a look at a few protection tips against the cold deck. You're now aware of a few of the ways in which pre-stacked decks can be switched into play. Remember, these moves are rarely attempted alone or without distraction. And finally, if you ever pick up what appears to be a cinch winner and did not see the shuffle or cut, be careful. Let's now take a look at some specialized moves for poker, gin, blackjack, and bridge. We begin with America's favorite card game, poker. Dealing known hole cards is a favorite technique for stud poker. The principle is simple. From a previous hand, a slug of cards will be committed to memory in order. After some false shuffles, the dealer will either hop or shift the deck if he's working alone, have his partner false cut, or take a chance that another player will unsuspectingly cut to the crimp. When successful, the dealer ends up with knowledge of all players' hole cards. The slug committed to memory in this demonstration was the 2 red sixes, the 6 of diamonds and hearts, the 2 red tens, the 10 of hearts and the 10 of diamonds, and the dealer has the ace of spades in the hole. It would be difficult to find a more subtle, more powerful cheating technique for stud than dealing known hole cards. Before we show the next series of moves, let's stop and explain an old cheater's code. Each position of the hand is a signal for the face-up card. With this code, a player can signal to his partner for a needed card. The partner will usually respond with a yes or no in the form of an open hand or fist. If the partner does have the card signaled for, then a card switching scam is attempted. Of course, hand signals are not the only way to transfer information across a poker table. The position of chips or cash, verbal codes such as keywords or tone of voice, literally hundreds of ways in which cheaters can secretly communicate. Let's see how the cheater's code works hand in hand with some card switching techniques. The first of these is called the brush. Player 1 has a fair hand, 2 queens and 2 sixes. The player will signal to his partner for a queen using the code just discussed. The accomplice responds with the open hand, which means yes, I have a queen. After the signals, the player to the left of your screen will discard 3 cards. The queen is tossed in by itself, conveniently a bit closer to his partner. The player holding the queens and sixes will aggressively push the discards away, as if telling the player to throw his cards into the center of the table. As I'm sure you realize, this is all an act to help cover the switch that actually takes place. Here's the scam again, and remember, the brush is a once-a-night play, usually attempted late at night after players have had a few drinks and start to get tired and cranky. Then at the first sign of a big pot, the brush will be attempted. The expose shows how the player with queens up will buckle the odd card, making it easy to release the deuce and pick up the queen, all in the act of pushing the discard aside. Now let's take a look at a card switching technique that can be worked repeatedly all night. This one's called capping the deck and has many variations. Player 1 has 10s up and will signal for a 10. His partner, who's the dealer in this scenario, is in position to help and will send back the appropriate signal. What's apparently going to happen here is the dealer will throw his hand away and the player with 10s up will discard 1 card. He receives only one card, fair and square, but makes a powerful full house. 3 10s and 2 4s. Hopefully you detected the scam. The dealer copped the 10 of diamonds from play and capped the deck using a technique already exposed earlier in this volume. Now watch the dealer's right hand as he throws only 4 cards into the center of the table. He capped the deck, enabling his partner to catch the 10 on the draw and make 3 10s full. Let's bypass the signals in this scenario and demonstrate one last discard switch. Keep your eye on the ace of clubs. This is the key card. The player will casually toss this hand aside, stealing the ace, exchanging the jack, all in one motion, all with one hand. This is a very fast, deceptive discard switch. Put this same scenario in the typical Friday night poker game where players are drinking, joking, betting and discarding, where there's all types of distractions that the skilled cheater can use to his advantage, and this move has a pretty good chance of success. The entire sequence of moves takes only a second. The end result is 3 aces full. In our expose, remember, one player throws his hand away with the card signaled for on top. The other player will cop the jack and wait for the right time. The move is made by sliding the jack underneath the hand, stealing the ace off the top. The cleanup is easy as the ace is added in the act of displaying the hand. Here's an interesting move that shows you just how far these techniques can be taken. Watch closely, and this time you'll see an entire hand get switched. A total nothing hand turns into a virtual lock of 4 queens. The move can be worked solo, meaning the dealer needs no partners. The switch has a high chance of success because it takes place at the most vulnerable time in any poker game. This is the moment when all players pick up their hands to anxiously see what they've been dealt. To successfully pull this scam off takes the work of a skilled cheater, capable of false shuffling, holding out cards during the cut, and then executing the actual switch. In slow motion, the legitimately dealt cards are instantly palmed as they're scooped off the table. You saw how the 4 queens are brought into view, and the cleanup is easy. The deck is simply capped with the original hand as the cards are picked up for the draw. The check cop is strictly for amateurs. After calling a bet, the cheater will apparently push the checks closer to the pot. It's during this action that one check is stolen. Some cheaters will use a gum-like substance in the palm of their hands for this move. The checks will now stick to the palm even though the hand is flat and the fingers are spread wide open. You should always be suspicious of any player who bets and then gives the checks another push into the pot. It's during the pushing action that one check is allowed to slide up onto the cards but stays hidden beneath the fingers. Here's a cold deck sequence from 7-card stud. Imagine that you're playing the 3 kings in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. On 4th Street, the dealer pairs his door card, but notice there's one other 10 exposed. You make a full house in 5 against 3 jacks, and a dealer showing 3 open 10s. Obviously, you're not worried about the dealer. On 6th Street, the 3 jacks makes a full house, and no doubt the pot is gigantic at this point, with limit raises made on each card. Do you still like your kings full in this situation? If this were in a real game, your Friday night game, for example, how far would you go with this hand? If the 3 open 10s bet, how much would you raise? And if you were raised back, would you re-raise? Coolers are designed to extract the maximum amount of money from its victims. Hopefully the finish to this hand will show you just how devastating they can be. Here are some protection tips for the game of poker. Almost all of the short shuffles, push-throughs, and stacking techniques from Volume 1 are applicable to the game of poker. The favored method of bypassing the cut is to have a partner cut to a crimp or outjogged card. Marked cards are commonly used in stud and lowball. The bottom deal is probably the most widespread cheating technique used in this game. Review the section on holding out, the cops, and mucking techniques. Beware anytime you see a player touch the discards. To help defend against the cold deck, never take your eyes off the shuffle or cut. Here's 2 quick tips on procedure to help protect your game. Pin the deck after the deal by placing 1 chip on top. And always burn a card before the draw or the next card in stud. These are 2 procedures found in all professional card rooms. Let's now take a look at the game of Gin, the country's favorite head-to-head game. The counterfeit meld is a brazen move attempted only by amateurs. The move takes no skill, just guts, the usual qualities found at this level of cheating. The player is knocked with 7 points, but closer examination reveals a discrepancy. What seems to be a 4-card meld is actually 40 unmatched points. The Queen of Diamonds is trying to be passed off as the Queen of Hearts. When a player attempts this kind of move, you can also expect them to bring a lot of attention to the knock cards or the score, something that directs attention away from the dirty work. To show what playing heavy is all about, count the number of cards dealt in this first demonstration. It appears as if the player has dealt only 10 cards, but as you can see has picked up 2 extras for a total of 12. This is a favorite move with gin cheaters, and when done by an expert, virtually impossible to detect. The principle is simple. During the deal, the player simply takes 2 or 3 cards instead of 1. They stay perfectly aligned as they are dealt to the table. Although the technique seems simple, it is very difficult to do well. Here's another move for starting the hand with 2 extra cards. As you view this technique, remember cheaters very rarely will challenge an opponent if he's watching too closely. They pretty much take what you give them. This technique is a perfect example. The dealer is ready to drop a couple of extra cards on top of his hand as he spreads the deck, but the move is only attempted if an opponent is busy looking or sorting his own cards. This is one good reason why you should watch the entire deal before picking up and looking at your own hand. In slow motion, you can see how the little finger of the left hand has separated 2 cards from the bottom of the deck. The cards are simply dropped onto the dealt cards as the right hand tables and spreads the deck. Since playing heavy is such a favorite amongst gin cheaters, here is one more method. The player starts with a legitimate 10-card hand. It's common to see gin players snap their picks off the stock in this fashion. After 2 picks and 2 discards, this player has managed to steal 2 extra cards. Now here's a technique for playing with extra cards that you could run into whether the cheater is dealing or not. Each pick gets the player 1 extra card, as he's simply taking 2 cards instead of 1 off the stock. Double picking from the stock is usually attempted early in the hand. You can expect it in the first 2 or 3 picks. You should always beware of any player that seems to look at the top card of the stock for that extra second or 2 before placing the card into his hand. If he's not trying to peek the second card down, he may be trying to pick up an extra card, as you view here in the exposé. One way to eliminate most of your worries with this move is to fan or spread the stock. This makes the move extremely difficult to do, but unfortunately not impossible. Playing with a couple extra cards this early in the hand is a tremendous advantage that will overcome the best of players. Let's look at a couple of ways that the cheater can clean up or dispose of those extra cards. Here the player starts with 12 cards. If he draws one and picks one from the stock, he should still be in trouble. But as you can see, not only is he knocked with 1 point, but he's ended up with only 10 cards. Many times after starting the hand with 12 cards, the cheater will play 4 or 5 picks, clean up, and then play the rest of the hand legitimately. The technique you're watching now is probably the most widespread method for cleaning up used today. In the expose, you'll see how the 2 extra cards are palmed as the hand is apparently rearranged. They are capped onto the spread as the player apparently draws from the stock. In reality, he adds 2 cards to the spread, repicks one of his own, knocks with 1 to effectively clean up and get everything back to normal. Here is one last method in which cheaters can clean up those extra cards. Again, the player starts with a 12-card hand. Although the actions will appear similar to the last technique, the actual moves are quite different. 1 card from the stock, 1 discard, and the cleanup is executed. The move takes no get-ready and can be executed instantly at any time. This is also the technique that a cheater uses when he's playing with a couple extra cards and an opponent knocks or gins first. The same series of moves can be accomplished without ever going near the stock or face-up cards. This gives the cheater an important out. The expose reveals a straightforward palming technique which can instantly hold out the extra cards should an opponent knock or gin first. After the hand is displayed, it becomes an easy matter to clean up the held out cards as the hand is picked up and turned face down for the next deal. This is especially true in games where the loser must deal. A location technique simply gives the cheater information about the location of a card or group of cards. In this demonstration, we use the 4 kings. Whether these cards are cut into or out of play can be worth quite a bit to the knowledgeable player. Here the 4 kings are positioned during the shuffles, so the typical cut brings them into play. The old-fashioned overhand shuffle as well as an off-the-table riffle shuffle were used in this demonstration. These are the shuffling styles found in the more informal game. The results of this sequence, both players received 2 kings. Let's follow the kings during the shuffling sequence. The first move is a short riffle shuffle, simply allowing the kings to fall last. This next move is called the break shuffle, which was exposed in detail in Volume 1. 2 more short shuffles and the kings are still on top. The last shuffle is the key. It's of the overhand style, and it will position the 4 kings approximately in the bottom quarter of the deck. In this position, a center cut has a high chance of bringing the kings into play. It's important to point out that even if an opponent were to cut high or low and the kings did not show during the deal, their location would still be known and the hand could be played accordingly with an unfair advantage. Same location technique, same kings, different shuffling styles. Here the table riffle shuffle is used in a running cut called stripping the deck. This is the shuffling style you're likely to see with more experienced players. There are many interesting and powerful traps and strategies that can be applied when you hold 2 kings and you know your opponent has the 2 remaining kings. One example is where you discard a king with a strong hand. If the opponent knocks, you lay off the 4th king and undercut him. The expose begins with 2 short riffle shuffles, only this time in the table position. A slug of cards is then pulled from the center of the deck and legitimately stripped. This action retains the kings on the bottom, and during the final shuffle, you'll see how the kings are shuffled into the bottom quarter of the deck, setting them for the cut and deal. The legitimate cut and carry by an opponent is what makes location techniques very subtle and also very difficult to detect. This is one of the reasons for their widespread use. The easiest way to counteract all location techniques is to simply shuffle after the dealer before the cut. Let's take a look at some protection tips for the game of gin. Always be on the watch for any type of butt or interlace shuffle. It's the perfect stacking technique for this game. Belly strippers are devastating when used in gin. Peeking from the stock is common but can be eliminated by spreading the deck. Be aware of who can view your hand from behind. Avoid getting the hand tipped off. You saw a number of ways in which the gin cheater can play with extra cards, followed by some methods used to clean up. Location techniques are difficult to overcome regardless of how well you play the game. And finally, you may try using a gin tray when you play. The tray is used in all major tournaments, and for good reason. Although the tray isn't foolproof, it will eliminate the majority of techniques viewed in this section. Let's now reveal some of the favorite cheating techniques used in the game of blackjack. The whole card switch is a technique that is used in conjunction with marked cards or dealer peeking. In other words, the dealer must know the value of the top card of the deck. With this information, he can turn a weak total of 16 into a strong winning hand of 20. With a move like this, the dealer will turn over his whole card with one hand all night just to get the players used to the action. Then the switch can be attempted with a greater chance of success. The move looks better from certain angles, but all in all, a very fast, deceptive change of one card. Not only can a whole card switch turn stiffs into a strong hand, but standing totals of 17, 18, or 19 can be turned into 21. With the hand of 17, for example, a 4 can be switched in, and the 14 hit with the original whole card. The expose shows an action very similar to that of a one-hand second deal. The queen is simply picked up, and the ace is allowed to fall face up to the table. The move has a lot of natural cover, in that the deck and left hand provide shade for the switch. The turnover is a commonly attempted move to cheat at blackjack. Let's watch a couple of hands and notice the procedure. After a round is dealt, the played cards are placed face up to the bottom of the deck. This is a standard practice found in the private game, as well as a few legalized casinos. In the second round, the dealer hits 14 with the 7 of clubs for a winning 21. Everything should seem fair and in order. The problem is the 7 of clubs was a card played from the previous hand. As we watch the same scenario again, notice that the 7 of clubs is in the player's hand to the left of your screen. When the round is completed, these cards are legitimately placed face up to the bottom. In the second round, one player hits 12 with an 8. All players have strong totals. The dealer makes 21 with the very same 7 of clubs. This time we expose the scam and watch the scenario from over the dealer's left shoulder. Once again, notice how the 7 of clubs has been dealt in this first round. Notice how the dealer's hand moves the dealer's face-up card to the left to turn over the whole card. This is the action that sets up the move. Anytime the dealer has a 10 or ace as his up card, he gets to check and see if he has a blackjack. The 4 is spotted, and the dealer will peek the bottom card as shown. in this case the 7 of clubs. As the dealer's up card is moved over, the entire deck is turned over, allowing the dealer to cleanly hit the hand with the 7 of clubs for a winning 21. Here's one final look at the turnover in regular speed to show you just how quickly the move can be done. Remember, 7 of clubs on the bottom. The dealer will move the king over and turn the deck in the process. A total of 21 is made to guarantee the win. Here are some crooked dealing shoes that actually make it easier to peek and deal seconds. These shoes have 3 basic parts: the frame, the faceplate, and one of 2 different peaking gaffs. Either a prim or a shiner will clearly reflect the top card of the shoe to the dealer. Both pieces of equipment have their pros and cons. The prism simply appears to be part of the plastic shoe and is therefore more difficult to detect. The prism requires decent lighting to function, and some of these gaffs only reflect 1/2 of the card's indice. This is the shoe used by a skilled professional. The amateur is more likely to use this shiner gaff. This small miniature mirror makes reading the top card easy, but if the shoe was suspected and given a close inspection, the mirror gaff would provide positive proof of a guilty dealer. When the top card is pushed up and wedged between either one of these peaking gaffs and the faceplate of the shoe, the top card can be easily peeked, as you see here. A skilled cheater can actually peek every single card that's dealt from one of these shoes. Finally, with the top card pushed up in this peeking position, it becomes easy to deal the second card. The 2 most dangerous cheating techniques in the game for blackjack, the peek and second deal, actually become easier due to the very piece of equipment that puts most players at ease. Here you see the ace kicked up into the peak position. The second card can now be dealt just as easily as dealing the top card of the shoe. The game of blackjack sometimes uses an interesting procedure for cutting the cards. The leaf hop is the cheater's way to nullify this procedure. I'm sure you've seen the deck cut in this fashion, where the top card is either turned face up or a red card or joker is used called a leaf. What appears to be a fairly safe method of having the deck cut is easily exploited by knowledgeable cheaters. This time we leave the ace of spades face up to reveal a blatant false cut. As the cut is completed, the leaf will fall to the table. The bottom half is picked up and slapped right back to the leaf. The original top half goes to the top, and the hop is completed. Here is a more sophisticated version of the leaf hop. Again, the 4 aces are used to show the control. But remember, this is a blackjack move, which would usually be attempted after the dealer stacks himself a blackjack or some other winning hand. The first thing to look for in the expose is the short shuffle, allowing the aces to retain their position on top. The dealer will then cut a small group of cards from the bottom to top, where a break is held. The top card is turned face up as the leaf, and the deck passed to a player to cut. After the player inserts the leaf, the cheater will separate the deck at the break and not where the cards are legitimately cut. The leaf is slipped to the bottom during the cutting action to complete a very deceptive blackjack hop. Although the hops were exposed in detail in Volume 1, the use of the leaf is widespread enough to include these 2 variations. How would you like to play blackjack with a deck of cards that consist mostly of small cards? If the high-low shuffle is being used, the end result is exactly the same. We've set up an extreme scenario to show you the principle. 2 rounds are dealt to 3 players. All the cards played are small. Now, in the typical game, anytime the dealer spots a few extra small cards or high cards in the first half a deck played, this technique can be used. After the pickup, the cards legitimately placed to the bottom, and the situation just before the shuffle is this. The top half of the deck has high cards. The bottom half consists of the cards just played, all small. Through a series of sophisticated false shuffles, the deck will maintain its position and separation of highs and lows. And now a standard cut carries all the high cards out of play, bringing the small cards to the top, where they are redealt to you, the player. When a dealer can consistently redeal you groups of cards that have more small cards than probability dictates, this hurts you in 3 basic ways. Number 1, you don't receive as many blackjacks as you're entitled to. Number 2, the dealer breaks less often. And finally, you always seem to catch a bad card when you double down. Let's watch the last part of the same scenario again. It's important to remember that repeatedly keeping a few high cards out of play does not guarantee the dealer will win individual hands, but does guarantee an edge strong enough to surely take its toll over the course of an evening's play. Let's watch the shuffling sequence very closely. If the shuffles and strips appear authentic, there's a good reason. Most of the actions are legitimate. There's only one small breach in procedure that gives the high-low shuffle its control. The high-low is a variation of a full deck control that was exposed in detail in Volume 1. The false shuffle is known as the push-through. The push-through is combined with a legitimate stripping action that sells the move, making it very difficult to detect. In our expose, we'll leave the deck face up to clearly expose all moves. As you can see, all high cards begin on top. Although a group of high cards are legitimately riffled, they are pushed all the way through the other side. This move is followed with a legitimate running cut. Remember, this shuffle and cutting action only mixes the top half of the deck. In effect, the high-low simply keeps the deck separated into highs and lows. Most players cut the deck at approximately the center, and this is just what the dealer is hoping for. A center cut will carry all high cards out of play, allowing the same unfavorable slug of small cards to be redealt. Even the best of blackjack players would be at a serious disadvantage up against this scam. Here's a little-known blackjack move. Top card is burned face up to the bottom, as well as all played cards and busted hands. These 2 procedures would seem to make the bottom deal impossible. Here's an exception to the rule. The dealer hit 16 with the 5 for winning 21. The 5 was actually dealt off the bottom of the deck. The expose shows the bottom card held out during the burning procedure and peaked during a squaring action. The 5 of spades is now set to be dealt off the bottom when needed. Busted hands and played cards do not get in the way. Watch the fingers of the left hand pull down on the 5 as the dealer apparently picks up this busted hand and places it to the bottom. In slow motion, you'll see the bottom deal execute to give the dealer a winning 21. Here's a couple of moves with checks. The player starts out with the 4-unit bet. Under action of spreading his hand for everyone to see, he has capped his bet or added 1 additional check. Blackjack and poker are the 2 games where it's not uncommon to see checks used in addition to cash. Since the private game of blackjack allows you to become the dealer, It's important to learn and protect yourself from both sides of the table. With this move, the player is always holding out or palming one check. When the opportunity presents itself to come over the top of his bet by apparently spreading a winning hand, the move is executed. The opposite of capping a bet is pinching. Here the player has a probable losing hand and wants to save money and take a check back. A steal can be executed instantly under cover of placing the cards under his bet. You can expect a cheater using either of these two techniques to consistently change his bet size. This makes it a bit more difficult for the dealer as well as other players to easily remember what was originally bet. Here's the technique in slow motion, showing the first two fingers of the right hand clipping the top check in the stack. This is easily one of the fastest pinches possible. It requires little or no distraction to the dealer for its success. Let's now take a look at some of the protection tips for the game of blackjack. To detect the bubble peak as well as all forms of peeking, watch the dealer's eyes. Review the second deal and its telltale signs in Volume 2. There are many methods used to nullify the cut, even when a leaf is used. Anytime a discard rack is not used, watch for the turnover. The high-low shuffle will never give you your fair share of high cards. The best defense against mucking is to occasionally count down the deck. And finally, it is possible to peek and deal seconds from a dealing shoe. And now here's a few moves for the sophisticated game of bridge. In this demonstration, dealing the bevel gives a proficient cheater complete control of one card, even though the deck is honestly cut. The principle can be taken much further by using slugs or sequences of memorized cards. This technique does not let the dealer know where the ace of spades will land, but does let him know when it will show. If the ace naturally falls into the dealer or his partner's hand, no extra work is needed. But if the ace is about to fall to either opponent's hand, then the second deal is executed as you view here to guarantee complete control. The first thing you'll see in the expose is two cards will be added on top of the ace of spades, one at a time, during two riffle shuffles. As the deck is presented for the cut, a squaring action bevels the cards. Now when the cut is completed and squared, the bevel forces one card to protrude from the back side. This card is the original top of the deck. Remember, the ace is third card down from this spot due to the earlier riffle shuffles. The outjog card is number 1. That's number 2, and the ace of spades is the third card. Finally, you see the second deal in slow motion. Remember, the second deal is only used, if needed, to assure complete control. Prearranged signals in the game of bridge are devastating. Look at the results from this typical hand. The dealer starts the bidding with 1 diamond. The next player passes, and the dealer's partner responds with a bid of 1 spade. The east hand passes and dealer bids 3-no trump to be declarer. The player to the left of the dealer must lead in this game, and almost any card would be a more logical play than the jack of spades. But if we assume that this player received a signal from his partner indicating strength in spades, then the jack of spades would be the correct lead. Bridge players will immediately notice that this is the only lead that sets the contract. This is a good example of how one subtle signal can easily change the outcome in this game. Location is a favorite cheating technique for many card games. Bridge is no exception. To begin, let's memorize the order of this trick: the Jack, Queen, King, and Ace of Spades. Now the order of this trick must be maintained through the shuffles. The shuffling sequence will vary all depending on the skill of the cheater. Professionals can memorize many tricks anywhere on the deck and then retain the entire deck's order with a series of sophisticated fall shuffles and cuts. An amateur might memorize the sequence of one trick, bring the 4-card slug to the top or bottom, and simply give the deck a couple of lopsided shuffles. Either way, the cut is legitimate, the deal is legitimate, and the rest is easy. As soon as the cheater looks at his hand and spots one of the key cards, he automatically knows the position of the other 3. The dealer has the king of spades, so his partner must have the jack. The ace is to the dealer's left or right of your screen, leaving the queen in the last hand. The 4 cards can be easily predicted simply because the trick's order has been maintained. This is a simple application of the principle, and it's important to point out that a professional cheater could easily tell you 2 or 3 cards in each player's hand. This next technique is ultra sophisticated. It's a combination of location, signals, and manipulation. It's powerful enough to be called a cooler, and when executed by professionals, the results are devastating. To begin, all tricks are sorted into a high-low sequence. Both the dealer and dealer's partner always follow this rule. If we assume the entire deck has been sorted in this fashion, then a legitimate cut can produce only 2 outcomes. Either the high cards fall to both the cheaters, or they fall to their opponents. One way to find out which side the high cards will fall is to peek the bottom card after the cut. If the card is small, then this indicates that the dealer and partner will be dealt the small cards. On the other side of the coin, if the bottom card peaked is high, this indicates that the dealer and partner will receive all high cards. This works out because all 52 cards are dealt in bridge, the bottom card going to the dealer. Still seems like a 50-50 proposition, right? Wrong. Here's a situation where the 6 of hearts has been spotted on the bottom of the deck. Now you know what that means. Small cards must go to the cheaters. High cards must go to their opponents. But as you probably guessed by now, there is one way to guarantee complete control of all the high cards. And if you haven't spotted it yet, you're too late. The method is the cheater's best friend, the bottom deal. What's interesting is that it only takes one bottom deal, the very first card dealt, to change the entire deck's order and bring all the high cards back to the cheaters. As you can see, the 6 of hearts should have been the last card dealt into the dealer's hand. Instead, a bottom deal was executed on the very first card. We're going to take a look at the same scenario from another angle. This time you'll get to see the bottom deal executed in slow motion. Remember, it's impossible to get all 52 cards sorted into a perfect high-low sequence. In the typical game, with 2 professional cheaters working, even 60% of the cards sorted in this fashion would still produce unbeatable results. Finally, there are subtler ways of peeking the bottom card instead of simply turning the deck up on its side and looking at it. Any of the bottom peaks exposed in Volume 2 could be used. We bring Volume 3 to a close by looking at some of the protection tips for the game of bridge. Stopping a set of prearranged signals completely is an impossibility. Your best protection is to know your players. Almost all types of manipulation are directed toward the major aces in this game. Never underestimate how powerful the complete control of only one key card is. Anytime a trick is picked up out of its natural order, beware. And finally, by far the best protection against the majority of moves seen in this tape is to demand all players to shuffle after the dealer. Even one riffle shuffle before the cut is an effective countermeasure.